Hello, Endeavor here. So today I'm speaking with Thought Thug. He has a YouTube channel of his own, and you're an artist, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So you do classical art, correct?
Well, you could say that. I wouldn't say that, but that could be a way to start understanding what I do.
You're a painter, correct? And you've done that for several decades.
Uh, what's that?
So you're a painter?
I'm a painter. I'm a sculptor. I'm a composer. I've worked in publication. I was the head of the Vance Integral Edition that published the complete works of Jack Vance, and as a result, I became a typographer. So I've done a lot of things
Mm.
in the
Eh,
arts.
Yeah. And what and you also make some political videos on people like Jordan Peterson, and several other topics like that. And you had made one video in response to me. That's why I wanted to have you on. And I just want to know, like, what are your political views? What are your goals, and what's
Yeah.
kind of your
Well,
vision?
my first of all, my YouTube station is just kind of to let steam off in a way. So it's I don't have a particular subject. The original name was Paul Talk, and I'm going to go back to that name eventually. But and um and I'm of course I'm interested in politics. I got into politics because of art, because of the extreme situation that art has been in for all my life. Because wanting to be a traditional artist, let's say, in the 60s and 70s and even the 80s and even the 90s was practically a thought crime. And so that got me into philosophy and that got me into politics. And on my channel, I, I follow you and guys like you who to whom I feel rather close politically, even though I have a somewhat different take. In a way, it reminds me of what happened in the late 80s when an art movement got started called classical realism. Do you know about that?
No, I don't.
Well, there's an art movement, and I know some of the people who are most involved in it, some of the leaders. And it's these people wanted to restore tradition, and they completely rejected contemporary art. And they went back, as they thought, to the 19th century French Academy, and it's become a huge movement. And I predicted it would become a huge movement. I saw that, and it has. It's become a giant movement. There's schools all over the place. There's schools in Europe, in France, in Italy, and all over America. In New York, there's several schools, and these people. And now I think there's a show at some important gallery in New York or a museum or something where they're showing the work of these people and the work of the old masters side by side, and it's called The Unbroken Thread, I think. And I mention all this because to me, these people, it's not traditional art at all what they're doing. It has almost nothing to do with traditional art, and in a certain way, it's not an exact parallel. But I think you're wonderful to call yourself a reactionary and to stand up for Western civilization and so on. But to me, there's certain things in your political orientation which there are certain things missing. Let's put it that way. Even though I'm quite in sympathy with it, and I tried to get in with the classical realists, but they always rejected me because I figured that they were allies against contemporary art, which I regard as it's part of the fall of civilization. And
Yeah.
so that's where I'm coming from.
So, what would you say kind of your political views are to really complement your love of art, and I guess where would you differ from me?
Well, let's see. I mean, I don't think I'm politically very different from you. I think the differences would be more philosophical.
Okay.
And in fact, we might be very close philosophically if we talked it over. It's just
Yeah. Well, that's what we're doing. That's why we're here.
right. And let's see. I'll start off with some kind of provocative, controversial statement. There are things that, well, I don't know exactly, because you are, as I mentioned to you when we talked yesterday, you are way in advance of where I was at your age.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you studied philosophical and historical and political things that I knew nothing about when I was your age. So I have a lot of respect for that, and how seriously you go into the whole thing. But at the same time, some of your positions seem to me to be based on the things you're fighting. It's like your criticism of the liberalists.
Mm-hmm.
I have a slightly similar critique, because your notion of culture as you express it seems to me to have what I would say Aryan flavor to it, rather than, say, a Platonic flavor to it. And
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say that my criticism of the liberalists and of a lot of the way that liberalism is run in the West today is that we see liberalism as as this fundamental good, and that, like, this end goal. And I think I think that the current liberal system is causing a lot of the problems that I guess you and I are both fighting back against. And I just think that your end game shouldn't be a political system. It should be, well, what political system can achieve what you really want from the world. And I'd say for me, it's kind of a restoration of the West's confidence in itself, and and just a positive European identity, and being able to maintain that. And the reason I'm against liberalism is I find that's harming that more than it's helping it.
Yeah, well, the way you do liberalism, I agree. But is there really a political solution? The solution might actually be moral and intellectual, because one could imagine a monarchy where things go pretty well, or things where the basic goals that you're after are respected. Or one could imagine an aristocracy or some kind of mixed regime where those basic goals were preserved. So, for instance, makes me think right away of Tocqueville's criticism of the American system. He said, it's great, it's fabulous, but it depends on Christianity. It depends on people having certain values and morals that don't depend on the political system. There's these other things that they have that make it so that the political system can work. And if you have a completely corrupt citizenry, you end up with tyranny. Well, that's the classics pointed this out very clearly. So we could invent the most wonderful political system. Get rid of votes. Only the intelligent people would be allowed to vote, or you could imagine you would want. And if people are corrupt, they'll find some way to screw it up. So I'm not sure you can solve the problem just by thinking politically.
Well, I agree with you. I think that the problem that is really one with just with us ourselves. I think that it's really kind of just Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, I think that our problem really is just one with ourselves, and that we've lost really the confidence in our civilization. We've lost really our ability to see really any value beyond the material. And uh,
Yeah.
I think that really it of course it is a bigger fight than just deciding what's the right political system, because I think that with the current you would need to change the way you just need to restore Western man's belief in himself before he can save his civilization. But I think at the same time, though, I'd like to have safeguards in place that current things don't that are happening right now don't happen. So because I think the problem is that the current political system is designed in a way that it will make a revival impossible with the current direction that the civilization is going. I think within 20, 30
Well,
years, it's not going to happen.
you may be right. You may be right about that. In other words, I mean, if something is not done about the immigration situation, if something is not done about education, if something is not done about morality, if something isn't done about demography and all these different things, it's game over. That's clear enough. In fact, the game is already over in a lot of domains. In the artistic domain, for instance, it's over. As far as I'm concerned, art is dead. There are minor arts, and there's wonderful things. There's different kinds of more or less popular art, but the grand arts of musical composition at the highest level and painting at the highest level and so on, they're just gone, and they've been gone for decades. And getting them back is going to be an affair of decades at least, if we can ever get there. So I agree, but it's for instance, my feeling is that if say in Europe, France, where I am, if suddenly people pulled themselves together and said to the immigrants, you play the game our way or you leave, a bunch of them would leave and the rest would play. So I don't, I think immigration is a terrible problem. I think it's being, you know what's going on with this ship off the coast of Tunisia and Spain. Have you been following that?
Yeah, I have.
Well, it's just, it exposes so clearly they're going and fetching these people is what's going on. And I don't think it's a organized plot. I mean, obviously they're plotters. They're doing this, and there's people who are glad it's happening. I think there's all different kinds of reasons that it's happening, but it's got to, it's just got to stop. And but I don't think it's the people that are a problem. I mean, for instance, I bring this up all the time, and I know you're not a white nationalist, for instance, but still, if you take America, some of the staunchest constitutionalists and most virtuous people are black, and a lot of the worst leftists and the most destructive are white. So, and here in France, I mean, the people who are the most intelligent and staunch that I know are actually North Africans, who are on the front lines of defending Western civilization and who are taking it on the nose for doing so. So I mean, obviously these immigrants who are just coming in, they're just a bunch of exploiters.
Yeah,
So that's.
But I think that my real holdup with the system is that people like like Macron and Angela Merkel and Justin Trudeau, it's that the reason they're not doing anything about this is because they're benefiting from it, and I think
what?
They're benefiting from it.
Well, it's not clear. Angela Merkel took a terrible political hit now. I mean, she's scrambling.
Well, she's scrambling because of the fight back against it. But
right. But I mean, if she was only in it for herself, I mean, to cut to the chase, I think it's stupidity.
I agree with that. Yes.
I mean, if it was, if what I mean, what's her interest? To stay in political power, to have things go the way she wants them to go? Well, she's failing that.
I
You know,
mean, I agree with that, but the thing is, it it benefits them in the sense that they would get that vote. They would get
but she's
you know.
losing votes. She's losing votes,
Well, I
and
mean,
and,
she's
and
losing votes due to the reaction to it, but
but
uh,
that's it. But I mean, that's the reaction is going to, even the immigrants keep coming in by the tens of thousands and the hundreds of thousands, and eventually starts piling up to millions. But even today in France, if there started to be a civil war, the immigrants would be instantly wiped out. Even even if they're 10 million against 80 million.
I
And
mean, I mean, like for example, Justin Trudeau in Canada, or Jeremy Corbyn in Britain. The reason that they want as much Islamic immigration as possible is because they know that they'll win 90% of that vote, and like we're really.
Yes, but look,
Yeah, go ahead.
maybe they're calculating that way. But look what happened with Trump. You follow Victor Davis Hanson?
No.
Well, he's very interesting. He's a classical scholar, and he's the only writer at National Review. I don't know if you read National Review at all, but he's the only writer at National Review that supports Trump. And he lives in Southern California, where there's a terrible immigration problem. He wrote a book about it called Mexifornia. and he down there in Southern California, which is just full of illegal immigrants. I think the Hispanic vote for Trump approached 50%. So even the immigrants are turning against these people. It's not absolutely clear. Now, Obama did that. Obama got all the black people and all the Hispanics to vote for him, but Hillary couldn't manage that.
Well, I mean, not to the same extent that Obama did, but
well, I mean, Trump won. Hillary lost. So I'm not saying there is that calculus. It's absolutely true that the Democrats, for all through the Obama era, they were convinced that they had a lock on the thing because of illegal immigration. That's true, but it's just because they thought that doesn't mean, and it doesn't mean they're right. And that's not to say that it's not to say that they're not evil and stupid and bad, but it's not clear. And also, I'm not saying it's not a problem. We don't have to worry about it, and we shouldn't do anything about it. But it's not at all clear that that's how things are shaping up.
Well, I mean, but the problem is though that well, I mean, you can say Obama. He of course got more of the non-white vote than Hillary did. But if you look at the numbers, though, Hillary still won the vast majority of the immigrant vote. I think it was about 70% of that. So I mean, the thing is, that yeah, it may be unpopular, but if the Democrats get the chance, they can bring in as much immigration as possible, and if that's a 70-30 win for them, I mean,
well, though when the immigrants start to become middle class, and I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm not saying that. I just think that it's certainly one of the motivations of the left, but I think it's not such a strong card as they think it is. And I think the one weakness is that sociologically that can change around, as we saw with the Trump thing, even though, as you say, it might not be that big of a change. But the other thing is the backlash. I mean, they're going to get. It looks like they're getting, thrown out by the backlash.
I mean, there's been backlash, but at the same time, though, I mean, it's been put to me before that if a border's half open and half closed, as in like when one party's in, it's open; when one party's in, it's closed, and it's essentially open. And that's not really something that you can reverse, but through the liberal system.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, the thing is, we're looking at demographics here. So, I mean, the demographic shifts are pretty apparent though in one direction, and I mean that's kind of what politically what matters, isn't it?
Well, it's one thing that matters. It's one thing that matters, but also demographics often overlap with political opinions, but not completely. I mean, the Democrats. I'm not trying to play goody two shoes here, but I just think that there's other aspects that might be more profound. Look what happened to the blue wall. The blue wall collapsed.
Yeah,
so,
but okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's all. I mean, I'm not trying to debunk your concern. I understand it. I just think that there are deeper things. And to repeat something I said earlier, I think if we were to pull ourselves together as a society and start insisting on our essential values, that immigrants would fall in line. I mean, that's what happened all throughout history before.
But the problem is that with the current numbers, though, they have no incentive to fall in line, because if the demographics, if the majority demographic is going to be a minority within 30, 40 years, I mean, what incentive do they have of assimilating into that?
Well, yeah, but things are going to change an awful lot in 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, like my real concern is with maintaining the European identity of my country, Canada, and of all the countries in the West. That's kind of what I think these countries really need to do. And the thing is, I mean, if that's a minority, then that thing loses.
Here, that now we're getting to the crux of it. What's being maintained, and what should be maintained is what is called the culture, or what's called the values. I mean, I would be even more specific. What needs to be maintained, for instance, is the arts. Well, we've lost the arts, so the arts have to be gotten back. So what else needs to be maintained? Now, somebody like Jordan Peterson would say, well, the sovereignty of the individual needs to be maintained. And you might say, well, look, all this talk about the sovereignty of the individual is leading to the collapse of the civilization.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Right. Except that, what if, I mean, when you use a formula like that, the sovereignty of the individual, it's like the word liberalism. Liberalism has meant a lot of things over, in different places and different times over the last few centuries. So one has to be very careful. But if Jordan Peterson, for instance, is right when he says that, I mean, if you look at what he means when he says the sovereignty of the individual, if you have to throw that out to preserve something, I mean, if he's right and it is the essence of our civilization, and you throw it out, then the civilization is gone before you saved it by throwing that out.
Well, I would disagree that. I don't believe that. That's
right. But then one has to go into the thing. Now, this is a point. I think I've talked about you in more than one video. I don't know if I said that in the video that you saw, but to me, you are an exemplar of what the civilization should be. In other words, you are standing up by yourself. If this was a war, you would be the guy who'd run up to the top of the hill. And so you're the only guy to shoot at, and you're calling for the others to come up after you.
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. Thanks.
Well, that's what you are. In other words, you are the sovereign individual. I mean, you're doing it for everybody. You're doing it for the sake of things that have nothing to do with you yourself. But you are making an individual, you're taking an individual stand. You're giving your whole energy to this thing. And so in a way, you're exemplifying the civilization that you want to save, and you are trying to save it by doing that.
I mean, I agree with that statement, but the thing is that I'm doing it I'm not really doing it for my individual means.
No, you're not. You're not, because you are putting yourself. I'm doing the same thing. When I paint, art is so full of ego. There's just all these egomaniacs. But to me, you, when you are an artist, when you're a true artist, you serve art. I don't sign my paintings. I refuse to sign my paintings, because everything's ego, ego, ego. So as an artist, I'm not one of these egomaniac artists who thinks they're changing the universe by splashing paint around. So I'm giving myself to this thing that I'm doing, just as you are, and these are individual stands. But when when you look at the idea of individual sovereignty, your criticism of it is exactly right when you define it the way you define it. But if you give it the definition that I'm suggesting here, then it's something else. I mean, if you have an ant, like, say, look at the Chinese. Now, nothing like that happens in China. They don't have anything original over there. Nothing has changed in China for thousands and thousands of years, and it's terrible over there. I mean, I've never been there myself, but I know things about it. I've read about it. I know people who've been there. Who wants to live that way? Everybody's yeah.
Oh, you go ahead. Yep.
Well, so they never invent anything. They only steal stuff, and their society is always these hideous mercantilist oligarchs with slaves, and they get by cheating and menacing, and it's just no good. And they don't have real respect for people. I mean, you can use the word individual, but they don't have respect for people. And at the same time, they're so smart. They get these IQs, and everybody's getting these fancy educations, and then they come over to America, and they do all this work, and they can only do original things in America. Why? Because in America, we let people, or in Canada, we let people do things, and we profit from what they do, and there's an exchange.
I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to that idea, but the thing is with when you take that politically, I mean, if we want to take Jordan Peterson for example, where I really disagree with him is that his belief seems to be that you're kind of defined by your career and by your the things that you've done, that that the only things that you've done. Like, I think one time he had said that it's ridiculous for someone to be proud of their civilization because they weren't the ones that created it. And I mean that's my real opposition to this idea of individualism, because I mean I'm not doing it for it. I mean, what I'm doing, it's not for my my own career.
No, but listen, Endeavor, I hear you. I mean, that's it. But the thing is that being proud, like what you're doing, you're taking a political stance. You're making philosophical studies in order to keep something alive. Just as I'm struggling to learn how to paint and understand painting and art and so on, to try to revive that, to try to keep that alive. And so it's one. Pride isn't really the issue. In other words, one has to be worthy of the thing. There's a million cases of, there's this wonderful man, and he invented this, and he fought this war, and he did this stuff, and he amassed a huge fortune. And then he's got a son, and the son's a rapscallion who just throws all the money away and dies in poverty and does nothing worthy of his father. And that happens all the time. So, he goes around saying, I'm the son of so-and-so. And I'm, and then everybody kowtows to him. Well, one has to, if you're proud of the thing and you don't embody it and you don't fight for it and live it somewhere, and then what good is it? I mean, you can't just be proud of it without doing something in yourself, and something how shall I put it? I come back to the example of you. You're taking a stand. You're doing something dangerous yourself. You could end up like
Yeah,
Tommy
definitely.
Robinson, you know.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And Tommy Robinson. I mean, it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. He's putting his life at risk for what he believes. He's a hero. And you're doing a similar kind of thing. You're not in trouble yet. I hope you avoid that kind of trouble, but it could happen. And you're sticking your neck out. And so, if you are proud of your civilization, nobody can say, well, he's just blowing smoke. And so and also the person, there's this thing. I mean, I like art. Take art. All these artists, they consider themselves these incredible creators. This comes from Nietzsche. They're going to be the people who generate value, who generate culture, and this has penetrated the whole society. I tell this little story. This happened maybe 15 years ago, but in France, and these nice little kids that I knew. I mean, these little boys. They were about 7 or 8, and they knew about me, and they knew I was a painter. And this little boy said to me, "Oh," he said, "you are the guy who makes culture," he said, "instead of painting." So in France, they've completely integrated this Nietzschean idea of the artist who generates culture. A painter doesn't make culture. He participates in the culture. He contributes to the culture. He makes paintings. So these disgusting artists who consider themselves like little demigods, yes, I mean those are the sovereign individuals where I would say that your analysis applies perfectly correctly. And there's lots of people like that. These people who just want to do whatever they want to do and have no morality and don't care. Of course. But if people like that are proud of their culture, what does it mean? It means nothing.
Well, I would say though that taking that politically, like as in what am I standing up for? I think what it really is it's a lineage. I mean, and I think that
you're standing up for more than biology.
Yeah, I mean, of course. To me,
because
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. Well,
No,
what I was going to say was that I would agree that a country like Canada and Britain, Australia, kind of the British Empire. It's more than just the fact that they had white skin. And with France, I mean, there's a lot more to France than the fact that they were white. I mean, that's not really my motivation though. But what I would argue though is that without that lineage, without the people that are the descendants of that civilization, I don't really think you have a civilization that civilization will continue to exist.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm talking to a friend named Lucien Oulabib, and he was born in Algeria, of Algerian parents.
Okay.
And but he is now a French citizen. He can speak and write French better than most French people. He's one of these people who really is totally into Western civilization and defends it and suffers for it. And Western civilization has washed back and forth across the Mediterranean.
Yes.
In the 5th century, there were more Christians. There were 60 bishops in North Africa in the 5th century. There were only 2 bishops in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And yep. at that time, and then the Muslims came in, and on and on, back and forth, and then colonialization happened, and it's back and forth. And then I get back to this point I made earlier on. If you who do you want on your side in this fight we're in? Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and Hillary Clinton, or Judge Thomas and Thomas Sowell and Shelby Steele.
The problem is though that that's not the reality though, because you mean you can pick certain individual examples, and sure, I mean if I had to choose between that set of three, yes, but the thing is that uh, politically that's just not the reality. Like there's not going to be people that don't have any connection to my kind of the society that I'm fighting for. There isn't going to be this group, this large portion of them that are going to stand up to defend that, because when
well, maybe not taken the demographic as a whole, but when you're picking sides in school, you're gonna play whatever, kick the can or something, and there's two captains and they pick sides. They pick the best people, and pretty soon the whole class is picked. One half on one side, one half on the other side.
Well, okay. The problem is though that you're not gonna have okay. Say for example, we take I don't know, France. Let's look at France for example. Yeah, if there was a portion of people from Algeria that spoke French, that were raised in France and really embraced French culture, then I mean, yeah, that's if that was like 2-3% of the population, then yeah, I wouldn't really make much of a difference. But the thing is, if that population became like 10-20%, they would have no reason to integrate into that French culture, and they have no reason to want to continue that, because it would be much more easy for them to continue their own culture and just bring it to France. And I don't think that if you have less than a super majority of population, I don't think you're going to be able to maintain your culture, and I don't think you're going to. I don't think that my goals will ever come true if that happens.
Well, the thing is that you're oscillating forth between treating these people as individuals and then treating them as part of a group.
Well, I mean, the thing is though that you have to look at what groups will vote for what, though. I mean, because
yeah, but let's say that well, it didn't count in California. Maybe it didn't count anywhere. But if there's let's say the white vote is completely decided, it's completely equal, 50-50 for whatever. Yes. And let's say that the black vote is 90-10, but it turns out that instead of being 90-10 this time, it's 85-15, and that puts the thing over.
If it's 50-50 though, then I don't know.
You could imagine that. I mean, that was at least. I mean, I don't know if there was a black or Hispanic vote or that put together which put anything over in Trump's election, but you can imagine that. I mean, the 10% or the 30% or whatever it was of Hispanic or black votes for Trump, I mean, they counted for something.
I mean, the problem is
those individuals are the. I mean, there's the collective. There's a collective.
Well, I mean,
the people who voted for Trump.
Well, the thing is that what won Trump was he was able to flip the white working class in the Rust Belt, though.
Huh?
He was able to flip the working class in the Rust Belt in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan. But
no, sure, okay, but he flipped a lot of black people too.
Not really. I mean, he had
sure.
more than
I mean,
Obama,
you can see them. You can see them all over the internet. There's tons of them.
Well, 88% of African Americans voted for Hillary, didn't they?
Well, okay, but those other the rest of them they're with us.
I mean, yeah, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to if they'd like to vote for the things that our interests. I mean, I'd be happy to have them. But the point I'm making though is that you're not going to be able to rely on that, and I think that really.
But we did rely on it. I mean, we got it. I mean,
well, that wasn't.
Why not?
The deciding. That wasn't the deciding factor.
Well, maybe not. But I mean, to the extent that I think we may well get into a situation where votes are no longer going to count. But I mean, we're already halfway there with the collapse of democratic processes. But why, why put
okay,
a
I'm not okay. I'm not like suggesting kicking anyone out.
No, I know that. I understand that completely. You're talking about a political reality that you see, and you feel that that people are going to group together with their racial and ethnic groups, and
well, I kind
and
of the thing is with my biggest one of my biggest problems with Jordan Peterson is that he claims that people shouldn't do that, but really, if we look at the way that society is developing, like that's just not the reality. That I mean, the thing is that you like some it's like for example, I mean, you're getting like if you got like 12% of the African American vote, which I actually think a lot. I think some of that 12% was for independent, so I think it was less than 12% voted Republican. But the thing is, like, the reality is that they see themselves as their own people in a way. Like they don't think of it in this individual sense. And
well, maybe 90% of them think that way, but the 10% who don't see, and then
well,
and then
I'll also add though that the 10, even then, like a lot of ones that vote for Republicans, I mean, there's a good chance that they still see themselves culturally as part of that group, though.
well, maybe
Like this is my problem with a lot of the beliefs of someone like, say, Jordan Peterson. It's that they don't seem to want to acknowledge the they seem to be imposing narratives onto other people who don't believe them themselves.
Well, I mean, we all do that. I mean, we all because people are confused and people lie. So we're more or less obliged to try to understand what's really going on.
Yeah, but
So,
I mean, for political reasons, I have to look at who really has to gain from. I mean, who really has to gain from the things that I'm trying to fight for and the things I'm trying to preserve. And I mean, if someone, yeah, anyone who says that they're willing to fight for that, sure. But the thing is that the reality is that the vast majority of people that would want that would be the majority population. That wouldn't it?
well, okay, but I mean, the white majority for Trump isn't that wide. Hillary won the popular vote. She got
but if you look at,
got the vast. Well, I mean, she lost, but she probably, if you count whites, she probably got a majority because the people in, not everybody. I know real conservatives in California, but and in New York, but there the big majorities are these leftists. So I mean, I don't know how the count is, but it's not clear that Trump's majority among white people is any kind of overwhelming thing. It might not even exist.
Oh, among white people, yeah, he had the majority. He had about 60. I think it was about 60% of the white vote.
Really?
Yes.
Well, okay, but that's only 60%. I mean, what about the other 40%?
I mean, yeah, but what my argument is that I think that 40% is the demographic that you have the best chance at winning over.
Well, I mean, but you've already won over 10% of the blacks, or whatever it is.
Yeah, but that's 10% of 10 of like that. That's only 12% of the population, though. I mean, that's not going to tip the scales.
Well, I mean,
if you have 10%
still, I mean,
of 12%,
in absolute numbers, you could make an army out of it.
Yeah, but not as much as you can make. I think you'd have a lot more success winning over the
well,
that 40%, and it's a bigger number of that.
Well, okay, but now you're appealing to a certain extent to something, to DNA. You're appealing to ethnicity, and you're not appealing to hearts and minds, as people used to say.
Well, I mean, my message isn't that. I wouldn't say that my message would be like, I mean, I think in appealing to DNA, I think you're kind of just maybe appealing to in-group preference. I mean, I'm fine with doing that, but the thing is, like, like the message of like you're trying to preserve Western civilization and its culture, its way of life. I mean, that's I'd say the population that probably would be the most receptive to it, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, okay, but in other words, I mean, if you're right, then there's something about there's something about it's true that there's these races and there's these ethnic groups, and it's true that they have characteristics. They build up in these countries, and okay, but it's America is a particular case, and Canada too. I mean, I mean, I don't want to talk like a leftist, but there's a little bit of truth in it that these countries are built up out of rather diverse groups. I mean, when, for instance, the Irish in the 19th century came over, and there were so many of them in New York.
I mean,
there was a lot of clash of civilizations about that, and the Italians and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that back then, and you'd probably agree with me here, but it's that they actually had systems in order to integrate that population.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I'm talking about something deeper. Obviously, immigration functioned better because we stood on principle. That's something else. I'm talking about a fundamental ethnic differences, because that's what you're saying. You're saying that there's these fundamental racial ethnic differences.
Well, I mean, what I'll say is that I don't know enough about race realism to say one way or another. I've heard arguments in favor. I've heard arguments against. I'm not a scientist, so I can't say one way or another. But I do know that sociologically, I mean, this stuff, sociologically, it has a very large effect.
Well, okay, except that you can point to literally millions of individuals who are exceptions.
Well, yeah, but those individuals, though, are not the majority, though.
Well, okay, they're not the majority ethnically, but they're
no.
I
mean, what I mean is though that the majority of those groups don't think in terms of individuals.
What's that?
So, as in, like, the majority of say, of the black population, the majority of them don't think in terms of individuals.
Well, okay, except some of them are totally on board for Western civilization.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are, but I think that.
Well, why throw them out?
I'm not gonna throw.
In other words,
I'm not. Okay, I'm not suggesting.
I know. Obviously, I don't. I'm not. Sorry, I didn't mean to suggest. I meant throw them out of the calculation. I didn't mean throw them out of the country.
Okay, here's the thing. I'm not gonna say, like, I'm not gonna throw them out of the coalition if they'd like to join. The thing is, I know that I can't rely on that as a effective strategy.
But there's the ethnic collective. I mean, Jordan Peterson points this out. There's the ethnic collective, but there's other collectives. There's the collective in favor of Western civilization, if it exists.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I think the reality is that collective is probably 95% white, though. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, maybe it is, but there's the anti-Western civilization group has a lot of whites in it too.
Well, yeah, because they're the majority population, though. But I think.
Well, it's the majority. It's the majority all over the West. I mean, these goddamn Western intellectuals from all over Europe and America who screwed things up so badly. They're the vast majority of them are white.
I mean, I agree with you on that, but it's like,
and okay, they're wrecking everything.
Here's what I'm trying to suggest is that I really want Western countries to have systems in place so that people like that aren't able to do what they've done, and I want insurance that you know, countries like Canada, countries like Britain, you know, that their
that
fundamental
they preserve themselves,
yeah, they
that they
preserve
preserve
themselves
themselves,
as their
and
fundamental
they, right, and that they perpetuate Western values, so that we
yeah.
can, keep, yeah. So
But the thing
then
is, though,
the
I
real,
think that it goes beyond Western values, though. I think it's also like, because it depends on what we define Western values as, because I think that it's a lineage too, though, that we're preserving. Because
well,
I don't think you're going to
I
have
mean,
that.
there again, there's lineage and lineage. I mean, my art, I've got an artistic lineage because of who my teachers were and who their teachers were.
Yep.
And so we have different kinds of lineages. And it's, and I think the reality of the world, in spite of immigration, it's going to continue to be that. I mean, unless something, unless these bad people really get their way.
Well, I mean, it's
they'll
looking
continue
like
to be a.
unless things change, they will get their way.
Well, right. I mean, there's a trajectory right now, but making a trajectory looking out 30 years. I mean, these are always wrong. It's like the ozone hole and so on. I mean, it's very hard to say what's going to happen. And for instance, your generation is more and more seeing things a different way. And you're somebody who's sticking your neck out, but there's there's the chastity movement that nobody talks about, and sexual mores, or the sexual revolution. I mean, it hasn't been rolled back yet by any means, but it's being heavily questioned in a way that it never was.
Yeah.
So
well,
how is that going to play out? Yeah.
I'd say that that's just in the preliminary, so it needs to be heavily questioned. I don't know if, I mean, I guess that's kind of what myself, and I guess you also online, that's what we're trying to this conversation we're really trying to start.
Yeah, but it's we're not absolutely alone. The questioning is rumbling out there, and the AIDS came along, and things are in a fluid state as usual. And I wouldn't be amazed. I mean, I might not be around, but I might not be amazed if there was some kind of serious backlash against the sexual revolution in the next 10 years.
Well, what I think is that if there isn't, well, in Europe and in Canada,
yeah,
if there
game
isn't
over.
that, oh yeah, it's game over, and it's not going to be us that wins. It's going to be the populations that adhere to
yeah, but the sexual revolution. The problem with the sexual revolution, it goes beyond demographics. It goes into the individual happiness and individual prosperity and family prosperity. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. I mean, it's a disaster, the promotion of homosexuality and stuff. I mean, that you point this out. These liberalists.
I agree, but go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, they don't see that at all. They're in with the thing. I guess
the point I'm trying to make is that I don't see the liberal system as a way that we're actually going to be able to reverse any of these changes.
Well, yeah, the liberal system, but what I think you should really mean is a certain kind of leftist mentality, wherein anything goes. Anything is all right as long as we're not killing somebody else.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I agree.
And that's not right. But you can try to legislate those things, but you can't really succeed. In Islam, they legislate those things. It's always a screwed up mess because you can't. These things have to be what people believe, the values they live by. and
Yeah.
politically you can't do it.
Well, yeah, I
Sometimes,
agree. It needs to be a cultural change first. I agree with you on that one. But the thing is that
yeah.
I want insurance that destructive societal policies such as that aren't
So
taken in the future.
so what would that insurance be?
Well, I'd say, well, I mean, I guess a policy that I would support. I mean, I don't say that I'm in favor of, say, an ethno state, but for example, what I would support is a policy that would say that Europeans must remain the super majority in their respective countries.
Well, so in other words, you'd stop immigration.
Yeah, but I'd also have a policy that says that you can't have it. You can't make the majority population a minority in the population. That you would not be constitutionally allowed to have.
Right, but I mean, if you stopped immigration, or boiled it down to a normal kind of trickle, the way it ought to be, that you wouldn't even have to make that law.
Well, the problem is though that there's politicians that gain from there's politicians that are gaining power
Well, okay, all right, yeah,
by
but,
imposing
okay.
those
So, but
laws.
let's say that you could make the law that there would be no more immigration. But let's even say you could make a law there would be no more immigration of non-European white people, or even let's say you could stop immigration altogether.
Okay.
Uh, okay, so then you have a situation like you have in Canada now, where you have a certain number of whites and a certain number of browns and blacks or yellows, whatever it is.
Okay.
And then let's say that the white people stop breeding because they become so corrupt, so discouraged, so stupid, so unable to get along with each other and understand anything that they no longer breed.
Well,
Whereas these other,
that is what's happening. Yeah.
well, right. So, and the other people are pumping out kids as if it's, as if they're making little robot warriors. So then what do you do?
Well, I'd say you would need to have. Well, I think culturally, yes, you would need to restore traditional family values. You would need to kind of
Yeah,
restore the Christian
yeah,
interpretation of the family. I totally agree with that. I think one thing
yeah.
you could do is just pronatal policies. I mean, of course.
Well, but they struggle with that in Europe. They struggle with that. They
Yeah, the
it's
reason is
amazing.
because
If you
culturally.
have a baby in America, then in France you get this big dole for having babies, and the result is that these low class women have these babies, and if they have a boyfriend or a husband, then of course the state doesn't want to give them that, so they don't have any husband. These live-in boyfriends. You got to look at the
Well, yeah,
at,
the policies would need to be that they would need to be that it would be the policies would need to favor monogamous relationships, which but yes, I do agree though. Culturally, you would need to you would need to have a cultural kind of revival and just a restoration in the belief of in the traditional family and in the traditional Christian values. I agree with that, and I mean that's kind of what I see. That's kind of what I'm trying to do myself. That's what I think a lot of people on the online community, we're trying to have a restoration of the culturally of that idea. But I think that that if we're able to do that, we would eventually want to implement policies that would ensure that would be maintained.
yeah, but I don't think you could make I mean, stopping this immigration madness. That has a political solution, but inculcating essential values into people, that's another proposition. And
Well, I mean,
I
we're
don't
not okay.
I don't
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we
yeah,
want to have a cultural movement first, where people regain these values, and
yeah.
if we're able to do that, we would want insure. What I'm saying is, I would want insurance that the
Well,
society would.
if you could do that, you wouldn't need the insurance. If we had if we if we had pride in our culture, as you say,
Yeah.
if we valued what we're always traditionally our values, Western values, and if we had Christian attitudes, in other words, real respect for the sanctity of the person, and so on, and so that there wouldn't be all this sleeping around and fussing around and nihilism and so on. I mean, all these other problems would disappear.
Yeah, okay, I agree though, but the thing is that there are forces within the countries that want these problems to continue because
absolutely,
they're gaining
and they have to be combated. They have to be That's true.
But the thing is, I would recommend having systems in place that those forces are unable to act. I know that's anti-democratic, but I mean,
well, we're going there. We're going there.
Well, I don't see
our system. Oh yes, we're going there because
my country's not going there. At least not the current direction.
Well, the thing is that this has been going on. I know a lot less about Canada, but certainly in America, we have the how shall I put this? It's America is not a democracy; it's a republic, and the Republican values that maintain America. For instance, the electoral college.
Yes.
Thanks to which Trump won, is under heavy attack, and the powers of the president have been steadily encroaching on the powers of the legislature, and the legislature has allowed that to happen. And these evolutions are based on the loss of citizen virtue. And this is a trend that has been going on, and it's continuing, and we're going to end up with, these constitutions will still be there and these outward forms will still be there, but more and more will be run by an oligarchy. And then the oligarchs, they'll do whatever they want.
And yeah, the oligarchs have been in favor of the destruction of our
That's
culture.
right. That's right. So how do you, what would be these guarantees that you're talking about? What exactly would be?
I would say
how in Canada would you deal with this?
I would say, first of all, reducing immigration maybe by like 10 times, so like one to 1/10 of what it is.
Well, how about just stopping it altogether?
Well, I think I don't know if that's realistic. I think just greatly reducing it. I mean, I don't want to say stop altogether, but I'll say substantially reduce it. So like
we can see a clear path to that. But how would you stop?
So
how would you stop these people from being able to do these destructive things?
So I do that. I would also want to have a policy which ensures the demographic majority of Europeans.
Well, you said that already, but how would you do that? How would you do that how would you do that politically? We've been over this ground already.
Well, yeah, of course I don't think it's going to happen. Of course that's not going to happen. Probably not within the next 10, 20 years or anything. But the thing is, like, that's kind of like I said, kind of what we're working on right now is a cultural movement. Then I would also say
I think a law like that is just unenforceable. There would be no way to enforce it. Let's say yellows, browns, and blacks are having tons of babies here. No, the only way to enforce it at some point is to start killing the babies.
Well, I'm not suggesting that, but
or forcing the white women to have babies, raping.
Well, not suggesting that either, but I think that you could have.
I know.
Israel was in a situation like that a couple of years ago, where they were worried about the Arabs outbreeding the Jews in Israel, and they implemented all these pronatal policies, which got the Jewish birth rate up to a healthy 3 babies per woman.
So you think that they solved the problem politically?
Yeah, I think that. Okay, if you
maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I don't know.
For a simple explanation, I'd say having policies similar to Israel has for Jewish people, for the majority European populations in Western countries. That would be my. And I would also say that, of course, educational reform. So I would, I'd banish things like critical race theory and all these other, this neo-Marxism in the academy. And
well, yeah, that has to happen. That's for sure.
And yeah, that's pretty much.
But can you do it by law?
If I had the power, I would. I don't. I mean, obviously, I can't do it now, and I don't think I'll be able to do that within.
But I mean, could anybody do it by law?
I think you could.
It's well, if you start forbidding the teaching of certain things, where does that stop? It's
Well, the thing is, they'll forbid the teaching of. Okay, for example, I would not be able to go into a university and teach my own ideas. I'd be kicked out if I did that.
Right. That's because the university doesn't want you to. It's not because the political system won't let you.
Yeah,
Jordan Peterson hasn't been arrested by the state government, even though or not all, but a lot of his university colleagues want him out.
Yeah. I mean, really, I don't know if you'd be able to like legislate it being illegal. The thing is, though, I'd want to be able to like sue people who teach that in these universities. Like, for example, a successful organization would be like the ADL. They could easily just if a school decided that they wanted to teach Jewish privilege in a university, the ADL would sue them, and it would be shut down before it ever got the chance to get off the ground.
Well, you're right about that, and the situation in Europe has evolved, and even on the American continent, more and more in that direction. But is that the way to go? I mean, is it this business, for instance, of in France? It's a big issue, denying the Holocaust, and now they've made these things illegal. And what's the result? The result is that Holocaust denial has become socially acceptable.
Has it really, though?
Yes. These French people, they're all a bunch of Jew haters, but not everyone, but way too many. And so they're anyway. They make these laws. Okay, it's all virtue signaling.
You wouldn't have someone going into a French school teaching that the Holocaust didn't happen, though.
No, except that you have in the popular culture in France. It's just you've never heard of this guy Dieudonné.
No, I haven't.
Well, I mean, he's got this substitute Nazi salute. It's called a quenelle, and they make this special sign, and it's a everybody knows that it's a stand-in for the Hitlerian salute.
Okay.
And he's just, it's just been a disaster. First is this endless drumbeat about the Holocaust, which is, of course, it's no question that it's terrible. But then then it starts being used by leftists for these insidious purposes, while they don't say a thing about Stalinism.
Well, okay.
And eventually,
would you say that the rhetoric in Canada, Britain, and the U.S. would you say there's more hateful rhetoric directed towards Jews or towards the white population?
Oh, well, I mean,
in the United States right now.
I see what you're getting at. And I take your point. It's just that this effort to legislate debate ends up with a situation where there's no kind of reasonable debate.
Well, so okay, I here's the thing. I'm not like one to. I don't have a hard-on for censorship. I don't have for a hard-on for legislating debate. The thing is, though, I want to be able to prevent the current trends that I see, the West going onward. And I think that if there was something like the ADL for white Americans and Canadians, we could prevent. At the least we could do is prevent critical race theory from being taught in schools.
Well,
And I think
listen,
that would
listen.
be huge.
I, my
And
reaction to what you're saying is that I, you know, I sympathize deeply with what you're saying, and but and I don't want to patronize you because I really do respect you, and but there may be a factor here of age because this thing has hardened into place, and you've come into a world where it's hardened into place. But I've watched it over decades gelling and hardening into place.
oh
And
yeah, I agree that, like, it's not, again, that's not something I'd be able to do within the next like 10, 20 years, but I think that I definitely would need to be able to I definitely would like, I think.
Yeah, I'm talking about. Well, they've over years they've forged this weapon of censorship,
Yes.
and you come into the world and this weapon is fully forged, and it's been pointing at you for your whole conscious life. And
Okay.
and I fully understand that you say, they're pointing this weapon at me. Well, fuck them. I'm going to pick up, I'm going to grab that weapon. I'm going to blow their heads off.
Yeah.
I get that. I get that. Except that I watched it happen. I watched this thing build up, and I'm convinced that the simplest example. Well, I mean, this is what it is. It's the identity politics thing.
Yes, I think that's what we're getting at here.
Yeah, that's what we're getting, and the identity politics. This is this great game that has been slowly forged by the left. I mean, I remember when there were no Black Panthers. I remember the excitement about the Black Panthers. No, in fact, I actually knew Leonard Bernstein. Not, I don't know if you know about all that, and so I heard an awful lot about that. And everybody, the most high-class people were all gooey-eyed about the Black Panthers, and they were invited into all the fancy places. And this was the beginning of virtue signaling, of leftist virtue signaling. And in 1974, I was in a boarding school, and I was rooming with some Black guys. And these were very good guys, except that they convinced the people, this is in 1975, they convinced the school to have a Black-only room, a special room just for Black people. And,
Okay.
and they got this. And
Well, the point is that I'm trying to make, though, is that they're playing identity politics and it's working. So why would I not try the same thing, though?
So in other words, except that, well, it's how should I try to broach this subject? Now, this is something I say in a lot of my videos. If you're making a basic mistake, if you're doing, you can do something splendidly. If you're making a basic mistake, you're going to foul up. If you build a house and you don't make a good foundation, you make this beautiful, wonderful house, and the foundation's no good, it's going to collapse. So one cannot afford basic mistakes. And identity politics is a kind of basic mistake because it's not where the real issue is.
Well, I disagree. I think that it's kind of not really.
I understand. I understand that you.
I think it's kind of not really a choice in a country, in
right, yeah,
a non-homogeneous country, really. Because I think that I mean, the stuff that I'd be advocating for would require a solidarity amongst people of European descent, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, the thing that's wrong with it is that it's a completely leftist thing.
Not
And
really.
well, it is. That's the thing. It is.
Well,
It's a
were the nationalists of the 19th century, were they leftists?
the national. Well, a lot of them were. A lot of them were. Yes.
What was Otto von Bismarck a leftist?
Well, I mean, he was a guy who was socializing things. I mean, was Hitler on the left? You know,
I'd say no. He was a right
well,
winger. I mean,
well,
not that I'm a fan of
Hitler.
him.
Well, this is a big problem, and this is one of my criticisms of Jordan Peterson, because it's something that he doesn't understand. And you've got to study Leo Strauss, and you've got to look at the terms left and right. What do they mean? What do they really mean? In France, these nationalists, they were on the left.
Well, I
Yes.
mean,
In the 19th century, it was a very left thing. And you point out, your terrific video, really terrific, about the Girondins and all that. I mean, how you something about how the left becomes the right, and these people who think they're on one side turn out to be on the other side.
well, the argument I made was that the left becomes the right when the right was essentially destroyed. So, I mean, and this kind of remains true in that someone who's
they didn't know, the Girondins didn't realize what they were getting themselves into, and they were against things that they found out too late that they were for.
exactly, yeah,
and they got destroyed. And identity politics, all its roots are on the left.
I don't agree with that. I don't.
I mean, it's something. You're a studious guy, and this is something you'll find out.
Well, I mean,
Hitler was a socialist.
Yeah, but he was a nationalist, though.
But nationalism is not. Nationalism is
okay.
Is
Viktor Orban on the left?
I don't know a lot about Viktor Orban.
The thing is, he's a nationalist. He's considered far right.
I know Hitler's considered far right, but Hitler is a leftist.
No, I don't agree with that statement.
But again, one has to define these terms. These things come out of the evolutions of modern philosophy.
Well, I would define them as one wanting kind of. I'd say I define them as the right wanting a sense of order, the left wanting a sense of liberation, and I think that
Well, that's Jordan Peterson's idea. That's what he says. And well, I don't agree with that.
Well, I that's the way I would see it, I guess.
The communists, they were trying to create an order.
Well, no, they were trying to break down the traditional order, really.
No, they wanted to create an order in which, I mean, it was a different order than the old order, but it was an order that they wanted. And they felt that their order was sanctioned by the evolutions of history. They felt that
but the thing is that order was meant to create equality, whereas the rights is meant to create stability. And I think the right definitely sees stability and hierarchy.
Yes, okay, but you've got to go deeper than that. I mean, this equality that the communists want, what is it based on? It's based on science. It's Marx's idea is a scientific materialist idea that sociology, that society in general, human society, progresses in a certain way, that these classes develop, that they clash, that there's a Hegelian thesis, a counter thesis and synthesis that results in a new thing, and it keeps going. And he's got these fantastical arguments that show that the final end of history, just by the mechanical solutions of history, will end up with this pure human equality. And it's a completely materialist scientific idea. It's not an ideal of a lot of people support communism because of their Christian, some kind of watered down Christian idealism. But in fact, the Marxist idea of equality is purely materialist.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I would say
therefore the values of Christianity just don't exist.
yeah, I agree that Marxism is completely material. But I mean, I don't agree that all what would be considered identity politics is Marxist in nature. Because you see, it's only Marxist when you're playing the oppression narrative, when you have the narrative that there's an oppressor class and an oppressed class. That's when it becomes Marxist. But I'd say, I mean, right wing nationalism is not playing that narrative. What they're playing is that I'd say the one that I'm playing is that certain, I guess, nationalities and stuff have a right to exist, and really they need to do what's required to maintain that. Oh, hello. Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Can't seem to hear him right now. Just give me 1 second. Can you hear me, Paul? Hmm. Well, I think I think it was an interesting conversation. He's, I seems to have, I don't know, I can't hear him right now, but yeah. Um, I guess I could end it there. I think we covered a lot of points. It was a very interesting conversation. I've linked Thought Thug's channel down below, so go subscribe to him. He makes some interesting content, and I linked one of his response videos to me down below also. So if you'd like to know what uh, where he's coming from and really what his critiques of me are, you can check it out there. Anyway, I guess at that I'll probably end the broadcast. Thank you for listening. Thanks for Thought Thug for coming on today. Subscribe if you haven't already. Go subscribe to him. Till next time, endeavor.